In terms of Sotapanapatti, it's stated in suttas that one should understand the consciousness. Consciousness is to be understood.
Well, not in terms of Sotapanapatti.
Okay.
A complete understanding of consciousness is arahantship.
So,
So if you have completely understood consciousness, means you have completely removed the slightest traces of conceit, conceivings, craving, and so on. So that means you're an arahant.
so a Sotapanna should at least understand, like,
One needs to understand what principle of freedom from suffering is. That's what needs to be understood by Sotapanna. The Four Noble Truths, basically. Then if you were to follow the understanding of the Four Noble Truths, it would carry on into you uprooting any conceivings. So like even when you arrive at things that you read in the suttas, like consciousness to be understood, non-indicative, luminous, all that, whatever those translations are from different translators, that sounds abstract now because it kind of is, but even understanding of such abstract things can only happen rightly on the basis of practical application. So now when you think in terms of the consciousness needs to be understood, you don't want to allow yourself to keep thinking it in the abstract domain, but you want to say, okay, so am I conscious now? You ask yourself that, because it's that consciousness that you're conscious now, that's the consciousness that needs to be understood. But see, well, if you approach it, how consciousness is this non-indicative awareness, luminous presence, whatever you translate it with, it's already an abstract category that you will be thinking about at the expense of your present enduring conscious experience as a whole. And that's why you'll never arrive at that which consciousness is, because that's just another way of misconceiving it. You start with the idea that's already affected with the wrong notion of what consciousness is. So you have to start like that, but you want to ask yourself now, am I conscious right now? See, if I ask you now, are you conscious?
yeah.
When you say I am, when you say that there is consciousness there, what is it that you refer to?
Me experiencing, me.
So is there any other way you can know consciousness?
None that I can think of.
Well, exactly, because if you can think of another way, it would be you experiencing your thinking that you're conscious of. So consciousness and experience are inseparable. It's not like there's consciousness and then there's the experience for the consciousness. You can only discern consciousness as the presence of the experience of any kind. That's why it's always the five aggregate. It's not 4 and 1, or 3 and 2, and 2.5 and 2.5. It's five aggregates, the heap. So it's the conscious heap. So if your experience right here, right now, you said that's pretty much you're conscious of, do you... Well, what are the characteristics? What would be the characteristics you might want to describe it? So, what would be the characteristics of the consciousness within that experience as a whole that you are conscious of now?
Consciousness that I'm conscious of.
Consciousness, describing the consciousness. You said, well, it's the experience. Okay, what else can you say about it? Don't think in terms of the stuff you read about consciousness.
Yeah.
Think in terms of right now. Say, I never heard the word consciousness. And I come to you and I ask you, can you tell me what do you mean by consciousness? That I can relate to my experience right here, right now.
The ability to think like for me, it's like, that's one of the reasons I actually asked about it, because it's one of the hardest that I found to be pinpointing without trying to put it out there, sort of like a external object.
So how can you pinpoint then? Because there will be so you can't pinpoint, or rather you want to pinpoint, but you know you can't put it as an external object. So what would you be pinpointing then, unless it's an external object? That's why it's so hard for you to understand it, because your idea of it contradicts itself. So you're right, you can't pinpoint consciousness, because that would be something you're conscious of. So how can you then describe the consciousness of something? Well, you can only describe it on account of that thing that you are conscious of. So you can only describe consciousness negatively.
Okay.
What it is not. Consciousness is defined by that which you are conscious of. That's why Buddha said there's 6 types of consciousness. Consciousness of the eyes, nose, mouth, ear, body, and mind. So the sight defines the eye consciousness. Presence of the sight means there is consciousness there. So that's the point, to see it. The problem is when people think consciousness, they think this kind of duality, like the world and me. I am conscious, my mind is conscious, the world is there, it's subjective. Subjective is where my consciousness is. But all of that is already on the base of experience as a whole that you have. Any division that you might have, me and the world, subject-object, is the result of the first things arising as a whole, within which you can focus on different aspects. So your consciousness is not more in you than these banyan roots are. Quite the opposite. If consciousness is only definable by the sense domains, means your consciousness is out there with the senses, not in your head, in your brain, or in your mind. That's where there's 6 consciousness classes present, so to speak. And it's not like one and then they take the place. You have your eyes at the same time, and there is your nose, your mouth, your body, your intellect. So these 6 domains of consciousness are always there. Obviously you can't attend to all of them at the same time. Your attention will be drawn to one domain more than the other. But see, now we're talking, we're thinking, you're looking at me, but at the back of your mind there is the consciousness of sound still enduring. Why? Because halfway through our conversation your attention can be drawn to sounds, or to the ant biting your foot. Means the body of the 6 layers of consciousness, so to speak. So these 6, it's always there.
Doesn't disappear.
Doesn't disappear. You can only attend it or not attend it. But either way, you can only do that because it's already there. So that's the point. Practically speaking now, your consciousness is out there with that body, with those senses, not in your head. Your attention, it's really, if you want to say something's in my head, it's like what you choose to attend on account of given state of things. But even that is not really in your head, because you can attend to your head. Which means, where's the consciousness then? Your attention. So the point is to recognize that this gratuitous notion that consciousness is in me is completely mistaken, because you can start with a gratuitous notion, consciousness is in me. Oh, how do I know that? Oh, because I'm experiencing the idea of inside of me consciousness being there, and I'm conscious of that whole thing as a whole. So that, so that cannot be my consciousness. So consciousness, literally, the most accurately you can describe is its presence of things. Which means there always has to be something present. And the fact that it's present means consciousness is consciousness, and things means presence of things. Not I am conscious or I make the effort to be conscious. No. I can make the effort to attend this and not attend that on account of it all being already within those sense domains that are conscious on their own. And when you realize you have 6 consciousnesses at the same time, you can't take any of those to be one single unifying owner of all the senses. Because which one is it? When there's 6 rulers, who's in charge when they're all on the equal footing? So the plurality, recognition of that within your experience, removes the basis for gratuitous assumption of that singular sense of self.
But mind is given a sort of...
Well, mind is the result of it. Mind is the result of the five aggregates. Mind is not consciousness. Consciousness of the senses means the mind is there. Mind is the result of the 6 domains of senses. 5 domains of senses, 5 domains of consciousness make up for the 6th domain, which is the mind. It's not like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's 5 and 1. If you would only to have I and I consciousness and no other sense whatsoever, self-reflection would not be possible. You wouldn't be able to think. There would be no space determined, so to speak, between these different domains.
There's nothing to move on to, isn't there?
There's nothing to move on to. There is no reference point. But now you have reference. You have you have 5 reference points that determine the 6, and 6 in regard determines the 5, the 6th. Sorry. So the mind determines the 5 senses, but there would be no mind without the 5 senses defining it. So that's the whole point. If you're inclined to think about consciousness or mind, do so, read the suttas about it, but you have to do it on the practical. You mustn't do it at the expense of your present enduring experience as a whole, right here, right now. Because then it's just abstract sort of whatever, proliferating. Are you feeling anything right now? Is there a feeling enduring? Yeah, means consciousness has to be there. So that's what I mean. You want to regard consciousness on the same level you regard form and forms, because forms are discernible only because of the senses, and that's discernible only because there is consciousness paired with those senses.
Yeah.
That's what I meant, like, consciousness is out there with the things. It's not like things are conscious, but consciousness is on the same footing as things you can perceive, because that's why you're perceiving them. That's why they're present, because the domain of consciousness enables it. But if you try to approach consciousness in positive terms, pinpoint it, you can think you did, but that's a contradiction in terms, because that in itself is presence, and you can't explain presence of presence. You can only explain presence of something. And if you say, well, my pure presence, there is nothing else present there, well, then you take your presence to be an object that is present for you.
As an image or something.
As an image, yeah. And exactly, the 6th sense is the mind. Mind images are present, exactly, to the mind. Because there is mind consciousness, or consciousness in regard to the domain of mind and mind objects, dhammas. But then you can also make it even more personal. You ask yourself, okay, so why do I want to understand consciousness? Because you want to get the right view. Why do you want the right view?
To end suffering.
So, cessation of suffering is valuable to you.
Yes.
And where's that suffering that you wanted to cease?
Right here, right now.
Are you suffering right here, right now?
I would say to a degree.
To what degree?
To the degree that I'm pressured.
By what?
By the neutral feeling.
Right, so you're not suffering basically on account of neutral feeling in itself.
No.
It's not painful,
No.
but you're suffering on account of its presence.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, so to speak.
Yeah.
So, why would you then go anywhere else in order to understand consciousness, in order to get the right view, in order to be free from suffering, in order to be free from that pressure, when you have it right there with you?
Because I believe I can.
You believe you can what?
I can look at for it anywhere else. Like somewhere
Is that a
else.
matter of belief? You obviously can, because you are looking somewhere else.
Okay.
So I'm asking you, why would you do that? So the problem is right here, right now. Your liability to suffering is a problem.
Yeah.
Your pressure under neutral feeling is a problem. Pressure of the pull of the pleasant feeling is a problem.
Yeah.
Pressure of the resistance to unpleasant feeling is a problem. Obviously, not all of them are present at the same time. One of them can only be present, which means you're liable to the others. So why would you go anywhere else if that's a problem? Why would you go anywhere else in order to solve that problem? Why don't you just understand that? That's what I mean. More often than not, when people want to contemplate, you end up forgetting the most primordial, the most fundamental, presently enduring reasons because of which you want to contemplate. And sometimes people get a sense of that, but then they go too far the other way. Don't be trying to understand. There is nothing to be understood. Just be here now. Or people know, I must understand, but then at the expense of their attempts of understanding, they abandon here and now. And actually, you don't want to do either. Or you want to not do both.
Yeah.
You want to find the middle. So, how can I understand without compromising my here and now, but without also dismissing the fact that you must understand the problem? Suffering is a problem, ignorance is a problem. If it's understood, the Buddha said you'll be free from it. So if you don't want to abandon here and now, doesn't mean you mustn't try to understand, which is when people kind of mystify their experience by dismissing the necessity of clarity, because any notion of clarity that they have is clarity of abstract thought. But there is that in between. There is that concrete thinking, non-abstract thinking, that you can think and make effort to understand on account of and within the present enduring things as a whole. You wouldn't have to abandon your present situation. You would not have to ignore it. You can't abandon it even if you want to. You are within it, but you can ignore it. So if you have a notion of consciousness, I feel inspired to understand it, absolutely great. Just don't allow that to take you away from present enduring experience as a whole. But then at the same time, don't allow present enduring experience as a whole to make you dull and lazy and kind of complacent, so you don't make the effort to understand. Present enduring experience as a whole, that's what needs to be understood while being present. So that's what I always come back to. What is my current enduring feeling? How do I feel overall? Neutral, but it's painful because I'm kind of confused in regard to it. I want to be free from it. That freedom is found right there and then within that relationship of what you feel and pain you are liable to because of that pressure. And that relationship is the relationship of craving. That's why there is only one root of suffering, craving, nothing else. Doesn't matter how diverse your suffering can be, if there is suffering present in your experience of any kind, of any extent, on any level, it's because craving is present. Craving in regard to what you're currently feeling. So if the craving is not maintained anymore by you, then feeling will just be the feeling, perception will just be perception. Whereas the Buddha said, in the scene there'll just be the scene, in the hurt just be the hurt. Not because you ignore everything else that's in it, but because you stop misconceiving anything else that's not in it. So it doesn't matter the extent of the sights, the extent of the sound, smell, taste, touch, thoughts. You will not misconceive it through your craving, through looking elsewhere. So you can still think abstractly, you can think about past, about the future. None of that will be presently misconceived through resisting how you feel in regard to it. And that was always a problem. Not knowing where the problem is. So trying to solve it, resolve it elsewhere. And the problem is in regard to present enduring feeling that you have right here, right now, and your attitude of resisting it, either towards, away, or everywhere and nowhere, ignoring it. You find the pain of the pressure, and then stop resisting the pain of it and let the pressure be.
It's only through the craving that you can try to move, sort of like look for a direction where the consciousness...
There has to be a first motivator, so to speak. That's what Buddha meant by craving is to be abandoned by the means of craving. You crave to be free from suffering in the same way that your craving makes you suffer in the first place. But if you then discern where the actual problem of that is, you can learn how to stop craving. Stop fueling the craving. Craving is not like a choice you make, but it's a result of the choices you make through craving. They end up maintaining the craving. So yes, you have craving to understand freedom from suffering, so out of that craving you make the effort. You read the suttas, you practice sense restraint, you're celibate, you keep the precepts. All that is rooted in craving, fine, and there's no problem with that. But if that's all you do, means you're never going to look at the domain where the actual craving is. But say once you start doing that, and then you recognize, okay, now I need to see where the craving is within this experience that's now restrained, within the precepts and so on, then you get to understand that even your effort to understand consciousness, for example, is rooted in craving. So that doesn't mean I should not understand consciousness, it just means I should not do it out of craving. So how you not do it out of craving? Well, by first of all not allowing that craving to take you elsewhere other than where that consciousness or whatever aspect of Dhamma can be understood, which is present enduring experience as a whole. Because that's sometimes hard to see that, because it's good to make effort to understand the Dhamma, it is. But you need to basically sharpen and make that effort more accurate, because otherwise you'll end up out of craving. To understand the Dhamma, you end up maintaining your craving because of which you don't understand the Dhamma. So, yes, I want to understand consciousness, or I want to understand feeling, or I even want to understand craving. First thing is not to allow that inspiration to do so to take me anywhere else and think on any other terms except present enduring experience as a whole. How do I feel right now? What is my present enduring posture right now? What am I like the Buddha said? You look basically and ask yourself, are there things in me right here, right now, because of which, by not abandoning them, I can experience lust in the future? Are there things right here, right now in me, because of which, by not abandoning them, I would experience ill will? Or I would get hindrances, or any other... are there? I don't know. Well, because of that there are. So I need to know how can I not be liable to these unwholesome things because of which craving gets perpetuated. So on account of your craving, you discern enough to stop yourself from going elsewhere, looking elsewhere because of that craving, and you start looking at the present enduring situation. Is my mind free from greed, aversion, delusion right now? Is my mind gripped with the desire? No. Is my mind gripped with irritation and ill will? No. Is my mind gripped with discontent? No. Okay. Now, next set of questions. Can my mind remain non-infected with desire? Would I know how to maintain it so the desire cannot enter it? Can my mind remain above ill will so ill will cannot enter it? Can my mind remain above discontent so discontent cannot enter it? And the only way to figure it out, the only way to accomplish that is to understand how that is done. Otherwise you're just wishful thinking, you're just hoping that, okay, now I've done something that resulted in me being currently free from desire, but I have no idea really directly, I have no direct insight knowing it's because of this or because of that, because I abandoned this and cultivated that. And because you don't know that, that's why desire will come back, your will come back, which means you're not free.
how do I contemplate that without losing the current base?
So what are you feeling right now?
Neutral.
Neutral. How about now?
Same.
So what's happening to that feeling all this time?
Enduring.
Do you have a say in that endurance?
No.
Did you have a say in its creation?
I don't know where it came from.
It's inconceivable. Can you tell it to go away?
Not that I can think of.
So why do you then try to relate to it? Or have a relationship with it? Or act out of it? That feeling doesn't even know about you. You don't exist for it. Clearly, it has its own arising, has its own ceasing, has its own domain. So what's the problem? So that's how you do it. You realize the problem is that you forget that. And when you forget that, you act out of the feeling. And you forget that you have no say, you cannot penetrate or enter the feeling or interfere with it. That's when you act towards sensuality, act out of ill will, act out of boredom. So cultivate and re-interrogate yourself. And when it becomes mechanical, sit down, tighten down the effort a bit more, and then find a new set of questions. They will bring you back to the same thing, which is what's my current body posture. Do you have a say in it? Do you have a say in the beating heart? Do you have a say in things that occur? No. You can only sort of squirm and resist when they're there. But even then, you realize that makes no difference. That's a result of me already being affected by those things. So maintain the context that whatever is present and enduring, don't lose the sight of it. Like whatever is present and enduring in terms of what you're feeling, don't lose the sight of it. And you will not be able to act too far out of the craving. And the less far you act out, the clearer the whole nature of acting out becomes.
Stop feeding it.
Pretty much. Yeah. Stop feeding it until it loses its strength on account of you not providing its food. And then you can overpower it. And subdue it and tame it. Same. You want to train a dog? First you do it with food basically. When it's hungry. If the dog just eating a lot, he won't listen to you. If he hasn't listened to you before. So you need to withdraw it from its feeding ground. Because if it perceives that it can always eat whenever he wants to eat, however he wants to eat, it doesn't need you. It's just going to do it. So you restrain it from going to eat whenever it wants to eat. Then it realizes that the only way it can get food is through you. In which case it better starts doing what you want it to do. And that's, I'm using the simile of the dogs all the time, but it's the same in the suttas, just in regard to other animals, but it's the same principle. Like the 5 senses are the 5 wild animals with their respective feeding grounds. Monkey, crocodile, boar, can't remember the other ones. Doesn't matter. The point is, in order for you to train them, in order for you to make them obey you, your intentions, your mind, not other way around, you need to restrict the extent of free roaming. And then they'll realize the only way they can get these things is if they listen to you, and then they'll sit down and wait for food. Because that's the problem, by the way. It's not that they go hungry or something. The problem is that they eat carelessly everything, even things they shouldn't be eating. So that's what I mean. You keep a corner of your eye at the back of your mind always with that peripheral context of what is the currently enduring feeling, what are my currently enduring intentions, what do I want to do, what for, to what extent. And it's not something I must keep this in front of my mind all the time. Quite the opposite. If you start doing it rightly, you have more and more space to relax within it. But you need to first subdue the animals. Chain them down. And endure the discomfort of it.